Bonjour. Merci d'être ici aujourd'hui sur le territoire traditionnel et non cédé des Algonquiens and Anishinaabe. For decades, the labor movement has said that replacement workers are wrong, that they distract us from the bargaining table, and that they prolong disputes, that the use of replacement workers can poison the relationship between an employer and workers for years. We listened. This morning, we tabled legislation to ban replacement workers. I've spent a lot of time around the bargaining table over these past 2 years, and it is hard work, and it is tense, and it is messy, and it works. L'économie canadienne dépend des relations entre l'industrie et les syndicats. Quand deux parties s'assoient ensemble pour défendre leurs intérêts, elles trouvent des compromis et une entente. On doit protéger ça. La négociation collective est la réponse qui fonctionne pour tous. C'est la base d'une économie équitable et forte. When we say the best deals are made at the table, we mean it. So today is about keeping parties focused on the table and providing more stability and certainty for the economy. Bill C-58 will ban the use of replacement workers in federally regulated industries during a strike or a lockout. That means no new contractors, no members of the bargaining unit crossing the picket line. The penalty for violating the ban would be $100,000 per day. Of course, employers could use replacement workers if ever the health or safety of people or the protection of property or the environment were at risk. We believe in free and fair collective bargaining. We believe that stability and certainty in our supply chains and services are essential. We believe that these things are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they reinforce one another. So, Bill C-58 will also improve the maintenance of activities process. A maintenance of activities agreement is how employers and unions agree on what work will continue during a strike or lockout. It's a truce, really, that remains intact even in the midst of a dispute. Right now, parties aren't required to have an agreement or even to come together to determine if they need one. With this legislation, the employer and the union will have to get together and determine what work needs to continue during a strike or lockout, if any. And we're setting clear timelines on this. 15 days for the parties to come to an agreement, and if they cannot come to an agreement, the matter can be referred to the Canada Industrial Review Board, Relations Board, to resolve after 15 days. Or sorry, to resolve within 90 days. He laughed, because that one took about a week. So he's entitled to laugh. The devil really is in the details. I appreciate it, Alexandre. Yes. This is not the time to stumble, my friend. This is important. It does mean more certainty and predictability in collective bargaining. Both employers and workers asked for improvements to this process during our consultations last year. Ce projet de loi vient des employeurs, des travailleurs et du gouvernement. On s'est tous rencontrés pour parler d'une question importante. Le résultat est un texte qui va améliorer les relations de travail au Canada. Il va y avoir plus de stabilité. Everything that we do for workers, paid sick leave, national holidays, preventing violence and harassment on job sites, none of that happens without good employers. All these changes require flexibility and hard work from employers, just as this legislation will. So I want to sincerely thank them. When we committed to this ban in our 2021 election platform, it was because Canada's labour leaders made the case, and we listened. It's worth remembering that before we formed government in 2015, the labour movement had endured nearly a decade of Conservative government that openly and proudly tried to undermine workers. It would have exhausted the most tenacious of advocates. But you fought for them tooth and nail. You fought at them tooth and nail, every turn. When we formed government, we didn't let up, and you didn't let up. And I know that even with this tabling, you will keep pushing us to do more, to do better, as you should. Today we table Bill C-58, and the work is not done yet. So I will end with this. Last year, we passed a bill to give workers in federally regulated sectors 10 days of paid sick leave. You'll recall in the States at the time that they were striking over the ask for 1 day. 1 day. And in Canada, it was 10. We passed 10 with unanimous consent. Because we all agree that workers should never have to choose between getting paid and getting better. And when the time comes, I hope that every MP in Parliament, Liberals, New Democrats, the Bloc, the Greens, the Conservatives, will stand up and vote to keep collective bargaining free and fair, to ban replacement workers. Hear, hear. Hear, hear. On va protéger les travailleurs. On va protéger la négociation collective. On va protéger les Canadiens des briseurs de grève. C'est l'évolution des relations de travail au Canada. I need to recognize my NDP colleagues. To say they were strong partners on this would be an understatement. To Alexandre Boulerice, thank you for putting good politics. Thank you for putting good policy above politics with me, but thank you for good politics too. We get a lot more done when we work together. A lot more done. Today is proof of that. Grâce à mon ami Alexandre, j'ai eu la chance d'améliorer mon français aussi. Très important. Merci, merci beaucoup.
Morning. It's a good day to be in the House and not in the Senate. But it is important for me to be here. I want to first thank Minister O'Regan and his government, but also his collaboration with the NDP in bringing forth Bill C-58. In my previous life, which I spent almost a quarter of a decade advocating for, of course, a ban on replacement workers, I know in my lifetime it would happen. To be here today in my new capacity as a Senate and representing, again, still the interests of working people across this country, I think today is a great day for workers. The importance of this legislation is not just what it says, but it's also about the reality of working people and unions and where they live. When strike occur, it happens in community. Workers don't get to leave their community and go someplace else at the end of the night. Their neighbors and their friends, they need to maintain that relationship. What this legislation is about, how to maintain that harmony, even during a dispute. When you have, of course, workers crossing the picket line or employers using, of course, replacement workers during a strike, it creates disruption, it harms relationship, and more importantly, it poisons the atmosphere for relationships to come back to the norm. We have seen from other jurisdictions. In Quebec, we have had a ban on replacement workers now, going close to 5 decades. Successive governments who have come with different political stripes have not seen it fit to remove the legislation because they recognize the importance of it. In British Columbia, we've seen the same thing. We've had a ban on replacement workers. There have been successive governments of different political stripes have come and gone, and they've all maintained the legislation. This will bring stable relations, of course, at the national level, and it's important the federal government, of course, be the champion of this. The Supreme Court ruled that workers' right to go on strike is a fundamental right protected by the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in this country. You cannot have a fundamental right and then it gets violated by allowing workers to cross a picket line when workers go on strike. I think this legislation complements the ruling of the Supreme Court of Canada, that this is an important step in ensuring the fundamental rights of workers are protected in this country. It's also about fairness at the bargaining table. There are many who would tell you this tilts the balance one way in the favor of unions. Nothing could be farther from the truth. What we have learned throughout our history, collective bargaining is successful when the parties recognize they got to sit down and negotiate fairly and fairness for workers. Workers want to ensure their employers succeed. They spend their life championing their employers' efforts to make sure their employers succeed. They have no interest in destroying the business that they work for because they recognize that's where they will go back to work. But at the same time, they want to have good labor relations. This legislation will go a far way in ensuring that continue. Of course, the government also have an important role to foster and support, of course, negotiations. Negotiations just don't happen on themselves. They happen with the support of the mediation services that the government provide and the role of the CIRB. And I'm hoping, of course, the government will continue to put new resources to ensure the mediation service continue to play that important role in helping the parties when they get stuck on an issue to find a solution to that. I want to conclude to say to the Minister and the government and the NDP, but also to all the opposition parties in the House of Commons, there should not be an ideological difference to passing this legislation, but this is about how we build a successful economy and a successful country. I believe the time is now for us to get this done, and more importantly, we could show leadership, as many jurisdictions throughout the world have done this. We're not unique in that regards. But more importantly, I want to say today is a great day for working people. It's a great day, of course, for workers, but it's also a great day for labor relations in this country. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lana Payne, and I'm the National President of Unifor, Canada's largest private sector union. And I am extremely pleased to be here today. It's an important and historic day for labor rights in Canada. Working people have organized for this moment for decades in this country. This is a victory for all of those who never gave up fighting for stronger labor rights. It's a testament that when we organize as a movement, we can win. On behalf of Unifor's nearly 70,000 members working in federally regulated private sector, including in telecommunications, road, rail, air, and marine transport, aviation, broadcast media, among others, I know I speak for them when I say that this legislation has been a long time coming. Finally, a government is taking important steps to uphold workers' fundamental right to collectively bargain by stopping the use of strike breakers. Historically, employers have been allowed to take advantage of what I believe are inadequate labor laws to threaten and disempower working people. Collective bargaining is the most powerful tool that workers have. We know that it changes lives. It lifts workers up. It builds equality and equity. And the right to strike, to withdraw our labor, is integral to free and fair collective bargaining. As we've seen as of late, workers have exercised this power in order to deal with the rising cost of living, to win their fair share of what have been extraordinary corporate profits, and to improve their conditions of work. Because this is for certain, when we can improve the conditions of work, we can also improve the conditions of our world. Now, we also know, because we're very good at our jobs, that the vast majority of negotiations are resolved without a labor dispute. However, I can tell you, in the rare times labor disputes do happen, and they drag on longer and pose greater risks to health and safety when scabs are employed. That's our experience, and it is the experience of workers all across this country. This legislation is a step towards leveling the playing field. It will be good for the economy, and it will be good for labor relations. It encourages unions and employers to resolve their differences in the very place designed for that to happen, the bargaining table, together, exactly the way that it should happen. I want to thank Prime Minister Trudeau and Minister O'Regan for making good on this election promise. I also want to thank Jagmeet Singh and Alexandra and the NDP for ensuring that this was given the priority it deserved in this Parliament. Our union has been fighting for this day for a very long time. Workers over many generations have paid a hefty price, standing in cold, snowy picket lines from Gander to Regina and in many other communities across this country, demoralized because their employer used scab labor to try to bust their union and deny them their fundamental right to strike and collective bargain. This legislation is for those generations of workers who have courageously stood on a picket line in Canada. You have a piece of this victory because you have been part of this history. Unifor will work to make sure that this legislation is the strongest that it can be, that it serves the workers of Canada, and that it comes into effect as soon as possible. Because, as a fellow Newfoundlander and Labradorian, Minister O'Regan would know how determined and stubborn we all are. So let's go and let's get this done.
B. Brusk, President of the Canadian Labour Congress. You know, when folks make the very difficult decision to have to walk a picket line, sometimes that decision is made for them by a lockout from their employer. Those decisions are never easy decisions. They are kitchen table decisions as to whether or not we can afford to settle for what the employer is offering or whether we need to take that action and to be out on a picket line. At no time should those decisions be made based on whether or not a scab is going to come in and take your job while you're walking a picket line. So it is critically important legislation that we've fought for decades, as the previous speakers have spoken to. This legislation will lead to less labour disruptions, to fewer work stoppages, and will help build a more balanced economy. And it will also increase benefits and the respect workers get from sitting down at those bargaining tables. We know that when scabs are used, it undermines that free and fair collective bargaining, and it really creates tensions within the community, within the workplace during and certainly after the strike is over. And those are tensions that we don't need to have. We need employers and unions to come to the table ready to bargain, to get serious about getting the issues done, and to not posture and waste time at bargaining tables. And so this legislation will force that particular issue to happen. I want to absolutely thank the Minister for introducing this legislation today. We know how hard this work has been, and I also want to thank the NDP's Alexandre Boulerice for working so actively together to make this a reality. It is a historic day for workers in Canada, one that we've long been waiting for, and we really appreciate this. Thank you.
Bonjour tout le monde. Ça commence à faire beaucoup d'orateurs. Je suis extrêmement fier d'être ici aujourd'hui. C'est le travail de générations de syndicalistes à travers le Québec puis le Canada dont le projet se réalise finalement aujourd'hui. Grâce au travail des néo-démocrates, mais grâce aussi à l'ouverture puis la collaboration puis au rapport de force qu'on a exercé dans le Parlement, puis le travail du ministre O'Regan, que je remercie aujourd'hui pour les discussions franches et honnêtes qu'on a eues pour arriver à un bon projet de loi aujourd'hui. C'est une journée historique, c'est un moment qui est important pour l'ensemble des travailleurs et des travailleuses du Québec et du Canada. J'ai commencé ma carrière au SCFP avec le conflit de Vidéotron et j'ai vu en 2002 à quel point, quand il y a des travailleurs de remplacement qui prennent la place des syndiqués qui partent en grève ou en conflit de travail, à quel point ça mine le rapport de force. Alors, l'importance de cette loi-là, c'est de rétablir l'équilibre du rapport de force à la table de négociation pour que les deux parties aient des incitatifs à trouver la meilleure solution possible le plus rapidement possible. Un projet de loi anti-briseur de grève, ça ramène l'équilibre, ça réduit les tensions et ça fait des meilleures conventions collectives avec des conflits de travail qui sont plus courts. C'est bénéfique pour tout le monde. C'est pour ça qu'on arrive à cette conclusion-là aujourd'hui. Je n'en dirai pas plus. Je suis extrêmement fier du travail qu'on a réalisé, moi, mon équipe, l'équipe du ministre O'Regan également. Et nous allons aller de l'avant en comité pour avoir le meilleur projet de loi possible pour aider les travailleurs et les travailleuses de partout au pays. Merci.
Singh voiced concern that the legislation could be weakened because of corporate pressure. So how confident can Canadians be that this anti-scab legislation won't be watered down?
Hello.
Take a look at this crowd. This is, you know, this is the strength and the determination of all of these people behind me. The strength and determination, frankly, of some employers as well. We went through very extensive consultations going into last year. And I even was very deliberate in the way that I wanted to set up these consultations over a couple of months. But I didn't want employers on one side and unions on the other. We mixed them all up like a creative dinner party, but a little more serious. I wanted them to mix, but I wanted them to hear one another. And it was messy. It was messy and difficult. And I would say to those people who might have archaic or antiquated notions of what this means, to read this bill. Because what we've done here, I believe, is done something that's so important to our economy right now, and that is provide more certainty and more stability. When you treat workers with dignity and respect, first and foremost, you'll go a long way towards certainty and stability. But secondly, it causes tables now to focus, it causes parties now to focus on the table, focus on the table. I know I'm copying and pasting every labor dispute and tweeting out, focus on the table, focus on the table. There's a reason for that. It's where the deals get done. And I need them focusing on that. I don't need them focusing on hiring people to appear on TV shows to tell me to get ahead with back to work legislation. I think I proved in BC, I'm not going to listen to that. You're all paid good money to sit around that table and find a deal. And if you find a deal, it will last. So, you know, this is about the stability and certainty that comes with not being distracted by anything other than finding a solution at the table.
Timeline, how long it's going to take to adopt this bill and
18 months after royal assent.
No, but how long before it goes through the whole process and it actually becomes a reality?
The reason we're taking our time with this, and you know, is the good news is we have a 96% success rate. Our federal mediation and conciliation service, I think anybody behind me will tell you, are a group of professionals that they all trust to get deals done, most recently in the St. Lawrence Seaway. They have great credibility on both sides, and that's why it works. Because both sides listen to them and they help them reach a deal 96% of the time. So what we're talking about here, just in context, is the 4%, right? But those 4% are the ones that you'll carry and I'll have to run in and deal with. And so, you know, they're important. And sometimes they involve our supply chains. So that's really important. But those people and the Canada Industrial Review Board, both of those are agencies that we've tasked to making sure there's stability in the economy when it comes to labor relations. And both of them said we need time. Because everything that we just said here in speeches is not hyperbole. This is the biggest thing to happen to collective bargaining in Canada in decades. In decades. Some have told me it's, you know, the Canadian labor movement has been asking for this for so long, longer than Canada itself. Back in the days of Lower and Upper Canada. That's when they were asking for this. So if people are emotional and excited, it's because they, and I look to my friends at the NDP and in the labor movement, they have, you know, they carry the weight of many, many people before them who fought for this. It is a big day. But in terms of how it will affect Canadians and the economy, because it is a big day and because it is a big thing, the people that we tasked to finding deals, the CIRB, the FMCS, they said to us, we need 18 months to resource up, to get the people, to train the people. I mean, I'm astounded when I watch how these people operate, the people who they tasked to sit at the table, how they operate, how employers, negotiators operate, and then you have, you know, the people from the FMCS and the CIRB who have to, I mean, it's the most complicated chess game you've ever seen. It's fascinating, but it requires knowing the game. This fundamentally changes things at that table. They need time. They told us 18 months. We listened. We didn't think when we looked at the reasoning that there was any games afoot or just kind of inertia or just dragging your feet. It wasn't that. This is real. It is a massive change. They need time.
Are we doing this because of the NDP pressure? In fact, there's a history of a lot of Liberal MPs voting against previous NDP motions to ban replacement workers.
Yeah.
So what do you say to Canadians who may look at this and say, yeah, that's right, the reason why that's prompting this change is the desire for this government to stay in office, as opposed to some great road to Damascus moment where you reverse course?
Because this was founded on, in the spirit of tripartitism. So the problem that we had with some of those private member bills was that it did not take into account full and meaningful conversations and consultations with employers and unions. And that's really important. We've got a great, great spirit and tradition of tripartitism in this country. You know, where the three of us sit down together and attempt to solve kind of some of the macro issues and to deal with really important legislation like this. This is the spirit of tripartitism behind it. This was the result of all three of us sitting down and working through it meaningfully. That's why I make this so different, so important, and I'm hoping lasting.
Some experts.
Beg your pardon?
How long do you think it's going to take for it to pass in the House
We'll
of
see,
Commons?
and committee, we'll see. I don't know. We're going through the biggest labor shortage in Canadian history right now. We have parties on all sides who have been newly converted in our House to the importance of workers, right? For many reasons. For reasons because it's right and just, and reasons because it's good for running the economy to make sure that workers are treated fairly and with respect and with dignity. And, you know, I've pulled off unanimous consent before. I don't give up hope. We did that with paid sick leave. People said it couldn't be done. We did it. I do not, even as fractious as this Parliament may appear, I work hard with all sides. I work hard with all sides. And when I find people I can work with, I will work with them.
Some experts say that this legislation could lead to a temporary uptick in labor disputes. How are you planning for that?
Well, I've just come off a few labor disputes. What we've got here and what makes things different is an agreement on maintenance of activities. That's what really distinguishes this. So when bargaining starts, parties have to sit down and they have to figure out, okay, you know, what are the services that, you know, we feel need to continue through a strike or lockout should that happen. And they have to determine that, and they've got 2 weeks to do that. And if they can't do that in 2 weeks, then the CIERB takes it up and they'll do it in 90 days. So, you know, we feel fairly confident about that process. It's amazing to me what happens when you allow room for unions and employers to come to a deal. Particularly, I'm thinking of here, without the threat of back-to-work legislation. And I'm thinking back to when WestJet, we came very close to a work stoppage, full work stoppage, right before May long weekend. And the deal that was in place between pilots and WestJet before was one that had been imposed on them. It was arbitrated and imposed. But this one they arrived at together, and it was the first time they'd ever done that. And normally, you know, when my mediator takes me over, it's very rare. They may be breaking out champagne, but it's often in different rooms. This time they were together. And immediately on that night, pilots telling me, this is a whole new thing. This is a whole new chapter, arms around one another. You couldn't make it up. I mean, you know, it was perhaps more shocking for me because only hours earlier they were at each other's throats. But to arrive at a deal together is a big deal, and it will last. Because those pilots also told me, and the employer also told me, that the relationship at the workplace between them was poisonous before then. It was toxic. And now, and I've checked in with them since, it is still not just cohesive, but a real working relationship. These things carry on. And when you bring in replacement workers, that can last, I'm not even kidding, for generations. It can poison a workplace. And this, you know, I'll be honest, I came into this, I knew that we had a mandate commitment that we expanded when we reached the SACA agreement with the NDP. But, you know, I'm not going to be anything other than I am. I do not come out of it with the weight of experience of the people behind me, particularly Alexandre, who I dealt with all the time as we went forward with this. And I have a great deal of respect for that. But the more, while I was dealing with him, I was dealing with labor disputes, whether it was CP or WestJet or BC Ports or the St. Lawrence Seaway. Well, I saw the light. this will make a significant difference for stability and certainty. That is so important to me, not only as a Minister of Labor, but as an economic minister in a government, to make sure that in a crazy world where all our nerves are raw, that we have found ways to work together and to make sure that these disputes don't last very long, if they last at all. And the best way to do that is to respect workers and give them the dignity that they deserve.
Okay, but what about you have 18 months? Like feasibly, this is not, if they passed it tomorrow, we would be a year and a half from when this comes into legislation. So what are you doing in the meantime to make sure we don't see an increase in labor disputes before this is passed?
I answered it. The most important people are the people who are at the table with parties to make sure that they can reach a deal. Aside from the parties themselves, they can tell you it is the FMCS and ultimately the CIRB. When they look at me in the eye and say, we need 18 months to prepare for what is singularly the biggest thing to happen to collective bargaining in this country, they are going to start preparing day one. They've been preparing now. And they've been briefing me on, what they need in this legislation. But most importantly, what they needed was time. They need the time to get this right. So we need to get it right, because getting wrong is not going to help anybody.
Why was it important to provide exemptions to this legislation? This right off the top here, right? So you're talking about providing services, the negotiations going to happen within the first 15 days, and then the 90 days the federal government comes in. Are there any other exemptions that could actually allow scab workers to occur, even with this legislation?
No, what they have to decide during a maintenance of activities round is there are certain things. You got to make sure that, health and safety of the workers, health and safety, the longevity of the property, you got to make sure the property is not damaged. You got to make sure that, a factory or whatever isn't just left to rot, that the people who go in there and maintain the equipment, that can continue to be maintained. You have to make sure, let's say, if there was an industry that involved, I don't know, maybe some sort of effluent or some way of damaging the environment, that's contained. But we believe that those are things that, there's, I think, great goodwill both on the side of unions and employers to make sure that basically the workplace is left whole, and that when they come back to it, it is as they left it.
Someone says, I can remember who, but the brings will bring harmony between union and employees, employers. Do you think the bill will also bring harmony between Liberals and NDP?
Oh, I don't know.
It's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress. You take it for what it is. I mean, we have several tables together, and on several issues with different personalities. I entered this relationship with Alexandre with an open mind, and fortunately, he provided me the same. And there's just no crap between us. Just get the stuff done. Just get it done. And I'm hoping we will dance again. We have a really good working relationship. He was very focused on the end game, as am I. We didn't get what my mother likes to call old foolishness. We didn't let old foolishness get in our way. He's not a guy for games. Neither am I. Yes.
Madame
Picard.
Madame Picard.
Oh, absolument.
Oui.
Merci pour tout.
Bonjour.
Bonjour. Est-ce que c'est vraiment à la hauteur et qu'est-ce que vous pensez du délai de 18 mois une fois l'adoption? C'est quand même loin dans le temps, ça pourrait prendre 2, 3 ans.
Oui, non, ça n'arrivera pas. Je peux vous dire, je regarde tous les gens qui sont ici aujourd'hui, là, la pression sera extrêmement grande. On a besoin de cette loi-là, que cette loi-là soit adoptée dans les meilleurs délais. Je pense que ce que nos politiciens nous disent, à mots à peine couverts, là, c'est qu'ils vont utiliser tout le pouvoir qu'ils ont pour faire en sorte que ce projet de loi, cette loi qui vient d'être déposée aujourd'hui, soit adoptée le plus rapidement possible. Moi, votre première question, M. Fillon, c'est est-ce que c'est à la hauteur? Oui. Oui, c'est à la hauteur. Il y a certainement, on sera invité à partager nos opinions. On va scruter, bien sûr, le projet de loi en pleine profondeur. Mais je peux vous dire qu'aujourd'hui, là, pour toutes les Canadiennes, Canadiens, les Québécoises et Québécois qui sont sur juridiction fédérale, il y en a plusieurs, qui connaissent des conflits interminables. On n'a qu'à penser à nos gens, nos débardeurs de Québec depuis 18 mois en conflit. On a eu Océan Remorquage, même chose, des conflits qui s'éternisent. Pourquoi? Parce que les employeurs pouvaient utiliser les briseurs de grève. Alors, on l'a fait, la démonstration ce matin. On est extrêmement heureux à la FTQ, extrêmement heureux. Et ce matin, il y a 2 raisons de se réjouir. Vraiment. Il y a ce projet de loi-là historique qui va changer vraiment le portrait du Canada en ce qui a trait à la négociation, mais il y a aussi deux partis politiques. Deux partis politiques où nos élus ont été capables de travailler ensemble pour le bien de la population. On a vraiment donné un nouveau visage et un vent de fraîcheur qu'on a tellement besoin de voir que Alexandre Boulerice, ministre O'Regan, vous avez été capable de travailler pour le bien-être de la population, des travailleurs, mais de tout le monde. Chapeau, c'est ce qu'on a besoin. Et j'espère que notre opposition officielle prend des notes aujourd'hui.
Quelle faiblesse vous allez peut-être regarder? Quels seront les écueils peut-être à éviter dans le projet, dans le projet de loi?
Très honnêtement, on avait toutes sortes d'inquiétudes tout au long là, du processus. Et là, je dois vous avouer qu'on n'a pas eu le temps encore de scruter tout ce qui est là. Mais tout ce qu'on a vu jusqu'à maintenant correspond à nos attentes, à nos souhaits. Je vous dirais même que le Québec, dont on est tellement fiers, que nous avons cette législation-là depuis près de 50 ans, devra suivre ce qui est fait actuellement dans le projet de loi fédéral parce qu'il y a des aménagements en ce qui a trait au lieu de travail. On le sait, le télétravail n'existait pas à ce moment-là. Aujourd'hui, bien, je suis fière de vous dire qu'on devra travailler avec le Québec parce qu'on est un petit peu en retard. Je ne pensais jamais dire ça un jour, mais tant mieux. Alors, on prendra bien sûr exemple sur ce projet de loi-là, mais rien pour l'instant qui demande qu'on s'élève aujourd'hui pour dire qu'il y a une problématique majeure. Ce qu'on a vu jusqu'à maintenant correspond aux demandes qui avaient été faites par les syndicats.
Allez-vous demander au gouvernement du Québec qu'il harmonise son projet de loi avec le
Absolument.
projet de loi fédéral?
C'est clair que ce qu'on a déjà vu à l'intérieur de ce projet de loi-là est plus avancé que ce qu'on a dans notre loi qui, comme je le disais, qui est là depuis près de 50 ans. Alors oui, très certainement. La demande était déjà faite d'ailleurs. Nous n'attendions pas ce projet de loi-là. On avait déjà commencé, mais oui, on va certainement et on va utiliser cet outil-là pour nos pressions auprès du gouvernement du Québec. Merci. Merci.
Minister, can I ask one more question? Sure. Are you concerned at all that this legislation could drive up wages and therefore drive up legislation? Or drive up legislation. Sorry, it's still the morning. Drive up wages and therefore drive up inflation?
I'm not getting involved in monetary policy. I just know that the wages that unions negotiate for themselves at a negotiating table are the wages that they negotiate because they believe them to be fair, and that's the agreement that they've reached with the employer. We still have significant wage gaps in this country. We still have significant inequality in this country. One of the best ways to solve that is to allow unions to fairly represent their workers at a bargaining table. That's the best way to go about it. So, there are many things that are involved in inflation, and having members of Parliament come out here waywardly and comment on it usually isn't a very constructive business. I'll leave that to the Bank of Canada. But I know that nothing should get in the way of collective bargaining. Nothing should get in the way of unions being able to ask on behalf of their workers for a fair wage and decent work. Merci beaucoup. Merci tous.